Hi all, this is going to be a quick little tutorial on how to do a graph in Excel. The first thing you obviously have to do is get Excel open, and I have some data that's in my memory clipboard here, and I'm just going to paste it into Excel. Let's go ahead and make this a little bit larger so that everybody can see it on the screen a little bit easier. And of course, this is the data that we were looking at in class just the other day, the density data, where I have a column of mass added and a initial volume and a final volume. So the data that I'm going to want to calculate here is volume. So I'm going to make directly below this a little column that says volume, and underneath volume I'm going to write a little calculation equation that says, and you always start a calculation in Excel by using the equal sign. So equals, I'm going to click on the final volume of the first trial, and I'm going to subtract the initial volume of the first trial. And that's obviously going to give me my 2.5 milliliters, which is my difference in my volumes, right? I'll go ahead and throw a unit in there. Now, one of the nice things about Excel is that I've just done that subtraction for the first set of data, but I can go to the lower right-hand corner of that cell, click and drag it down, and I can calculate it 3 more times. So there are my volumes right there, which in each and every case represent the difference between the final volume and the initial volume for the water displacement trials that I've done. I'm going to then take my column of mass and I'm going to copy it, right? Which I can do by using Command C or going up to the Edit menu, and I'm going to put it into this column right here. Let's go ahead and resize a little bit so we can see all the information. And I just noticed a problem here, which is that I don't have a space in the volume column, so I'm going to take this information right here. I'm going to copy it and paste it sort of appropriately, right? Let's go ahead and center this information, right, so that it looks nice. And this is the raw data that I'm going to be graphing, right? It's very important to remember in Excel, or to know in Excel, that whatever column of data you choose to use first, that is always going to be the X value in our graph on the X-axis. And the second column of information is always going to be the Y, right? So let's go ahead and center that as well. And that's something very important to pay attention to. So essentially what you want to do with your data is you want to get it organized in such a way that you have 2 columns of information where the first column is your volume. Remember, this is not raw data, this is calculated volume of the metal that you added. And you want to get, in the second column, mass. Okay? So if you have that set up correctly, you can click on the first piece of information and highlight it all, and then simply go to Charts and click on Scatter and mark Scatter, and it will make the graph for you right there. So there are my 4 data points. I can hover over each and see what they are. And let's do a couple things to this graph before we add in a second set of data. So one of the things that we're going to do here is we're going to simply go to the tab up here that says Chart Layout, and we're going to give the chart a title, right? So let's call this mass versus volume for 2 metals, right? We're going to add in a second set of data in just a minute here. Second thing we want to do is we want to have some labels on our X and Y axes. So let's come here up to Chart Layout again, Data Labels, and sorry, not Data Labels, sorry, Axis Labels. So we're going to go to Chart Layout and Axis Titles, and let's give the horizontal axis a title directly below it. And remember that it's very important that this data on the x-axis is your volume. So we're going to type right in there for the axis title, volume, and we'll go ahead and do parentheses mLs, right? Every axis needs to have a title and a unit associated with it. Let's go ahead up here to axes titles and do the vertical axis. We'll make it be a rotated kind of a title so that it's sort of rotated vertically, and you can just click right in there and call it mass, and again parentheses grams, right? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and bring up my second set of data, which I showed you in class, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight this second set of data that right here is already highlighted, and I'm going to use that in my example here as my second set of data. So what I've done again so far is I've made a graph of this information, which is calculated data specifically for the volumes. I want to do the exact same thing for the second metal that I have here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to steal this information right here by copying it into memory, and I'm going to paste that right down here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this information, which is mass of the second metal, copy it, put it right in here, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing I did before. How do I start if I want to do a calculation in Excel? Always with a zero. Sorry, always with an equals. And I'm going to do equals final volume minus initial volume. Right? So literally, I just click on the cells. Excel knows I'm clicking on C21. It knows I'm clicking on B21. And then Excel will calculate that. I go to the lower right-hand corner of the cell, and I click and drag it downwards. And then I take everything right here, and I center it so that it looks nice. Right? Okay, cool. So I'd like to add this information in. So the way I add that information in is I come back up to the graph that I've already made. We're going to do 2 lines on this graph, not 2 separate graphs, but 2 lines on one graph. And I'm going to simply go up to Chart, Source Data. Now, right now, this is called Series 1. I probably don't want that to be called Series 1, so I'm going to click on Series 1. It's already highlighted. And I'm going to click on the name. And let's just say this was aluminum, right? And I'll click on Add, since I want to add a new series. Let's pretend like this second metal that I have down here is something like nickel, right? All right, now my job is going to be to tell Excel where the X and Y information is for this set of data. So I'm going to click on the X values, and I'm going to scroll down here to the data, right? And remember that X definitely has to be volume. And I'm going to find the calculated volumes, right, which represent the difference between the final and initial volumes. And I'm going to highlight, I'm going to click on the first set of data, and I'm going to hold it down and highlight all 4 rows, right? So notice what Excel is saying. It's saying that, okay, I'm seeing the x-axis data in B27 through B30, right? Click on the icon to go back. Do the exact same thing for the Y. Again, Y has to be mass, so I click on the first, and I click and drag down to highlight all 4 rows. Once I've done that, and I have aluminum listed as the first series and nickel listed as the second series, I click OK, and my graph will now have 2 lines on it, or sorry, 2 sets of data on it. I've already given it the title, I've already given it the X and Y axes labels. Notice that when I went to Chart, Source Data, I was able to change the series name to aluminum and nickel. That's how I was able to get these to show up, right? Last thing I want to do here is I want to click on one data point in the aluminum set of data. And I want to go up to Chart. I want to do Add Trend Line, and it will draw a line through the points, right? This is what's called a best fit line. Now, 2 important things I have to pay attention to under Options. One is you have to set the y-intercept to be 0, and the second thing is that I need to see the equation on the chart, right? I can make that line go backwards towards 0 by simply extending it backwards, a certain number of periods, and you can sort of see that I just made the line hit 0 right there. All right, cool. Let's move this over here so it's a little bit more clear that that equation represents that line. Hopefully you're going to recognize this as being in the y equals mx plus b format, where b is 0, so that it gets dropped out. We're going to go ahead and click on linear aluminum and delete it since we don't need that there. I already have aluminum listed. When I do this for the second set of data that I've graphed, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Click on one point, come up here to chart, do add trend line. I'm going to click on options, and I'm going to make sure that I set the y-intercept to 0, that I display the equation on the screen, and very important, well actually the very important thing is y-intercept is 0, because if I don't do that, it's going to be a completely different equation. So y-intercept is 0. And then let's go ahead and make this go backwards and hit 0, right? So we can sort of see that from this graph right here, and by the way, what I could do is I could take this graph, right? Right now the graph is not highlighted. Right now the graph is highlighted. Once it's highlighted, I can go ahead and copy it. And as you move ahead to writing up the lab, one thing that you're going to be able to do is you're going to be able to, type up a Word document that says, density lab, and you're going to have the appropriate information in terms of, an introduction, and you're going to have data, and you're going to have so on and so forth. But one thing you're going to have in there is you're going to have the graph that we just made in there, right? So I can click on this and put it into Word, and I can center it, and I could even, if I wanted to, sort of, resize this graph by making it bigger or smaller to fit sort of appropriately. It's kind of small, isn't it? To fit appropriately in here. You can play around with the graph, and for example, you can come in here and you can get rid of those horizontal lines if you don't want them, and you can shrink the size of your, that's not very good, is it? You can shrink the size of your legend, you can move your legend around, and so on and so forth, right? So this is what I'm looking for you to do in terms of a graph of your data, and ideally 2 lines on one set of axes for the water displacement, and then 2 lines on one set of axes for the caliper measurements, right? So a total of 2 graphs. All right, cool. That's the video tutorial. Hope it helped. There's also a set of directions on Canvas if you're having trouble. Thanks.